there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart Podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the normal disclaimer: I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support, such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. A couple of things to address before we dive into today's episode. First, happy spring equinox. And I invite you to consider this as a metaphor for life in general, a time of coming out of the darkness and into the light. Second, I have a book recommendation, and information on this will be in the show notes. It's a book I've been reading. I'm about halfway through, and I wish I had video on this so you could see all the many post-it notes and highlights and underlines that I've made throughout this book. And it is a book that I recommend to both estranged adult children and estranged parents. Generally, when I have book recommendations about estrangement, it's generally for one or the other. This one I want to recommend to both. I think if you are at all interested, curious about what makes people tick, why people do the things they do, how did you get to estrangement, why did you choose estrangement, why do you continue estrangement, why do they continue to not talk with you, things along those lines, then I think this book is filled with valuable information. The title of the book is called There's a Hole in My Love Cup by Sven Erlandson. And Sven is, I found him on social media, and he's former military clergy and a former NCAA strength coach, and he's the creator of Badass Counseling. He doesn't fit in a box. He is not a traditional therapist. He walks to his own, the beat of his own little drummer, and I just think he's got a wealth of information that could be helpful for all parties involved in estrangement. So anyway, again, that information will be in the show notes. And as a reminder, I have an online support group for estranged moms. If you're a estranged mom who identifies as spiritual and you approach estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and you desire to do inner self-work and reflection, then I invite you to check us out at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. Okay, on to today's episode, titled, They Won't Speak to Me. How Can We Repair Things Without Communication? But first, a couple of quotes. The first one: So much of our suffering comes from bargaining with reality, by Whitney Goodman, licensed marriage and family therapist. The second one: Creation is invariably preceded by destruction. Things must die for things to live. Sven Erlandson. And the third one: You're going to find some amazing guidance in the most unexpected places. Just because someone doesn't look like a traditional therapist or their attitude or language doesn't fit our mold of quote-unquote professional, doesn't mean they don't have gems for living life on life's terms. Dr. Glennon Doyle. So I wanted to begin today's episode. This is one of the top 5 questions that I'm asked as an estrangement and reconciliation coach and mediator and mentor, and it always comes from the parents asking, how on earth can I do anything? How can I prove to them I've changed? How can I apologize if they won't talk to me? How can we ever reach reconciliation if they won't speak to me? And I want to first say that I come at this from a rather non-typical way. that's the way I do life in general. I'm not a traditional person per se, with most everything in life. And it has served me well to think outside of the box, to get out of the box, and to think about different and creative ways of reaching the goals that I have in life. That being said, when we are dealing with others, it's important to remember we cannot change the other person. Whether you are an estranged parent with an estranged adult child who won't talk with you, or you're an estranged adult child with an estranged parent who refuses to see things from your perspective. It doesn't matter. You cannot change the other person. The only person you have control over is yourself. So I generally look for inspiration, guidance, ideas, different ways of thinking from a variety of different people and places and things. And there are times in life when I come across a particular person or thing and I like this, A, B, and C about them, but D, E, and F I don't like. And so what I've learned to do in my life is I take what works for me and I leave the rest. So when you're looking for places of support, places of inspiration, places of what works for me, how can I fix this? How can I change this? We make this better? I encourage you to not discount someone as a whole simply because of one or two things that you may not like about them, or things that you have potentially heard about them from other people, right? I'm encouraging you, and there's a point to this as it relates to estrangement. I'm encouraging you to think on your own. I did not start this podcast for people to follow me like some sort of groupie for a band. I want people who work with me, the estranged parents and estranged adult children who work with me, I want them to think for themselves. I can give suggestions and offer ideas and things like that, but if it rubs you absolutely the wrong way and it doesn't work for you, then that's okay. You need to find what works for you to be able to live a happy, joyful, fulfilling life. And if that doesn't come from me, then so be it. If part of it comes from me, then so be that. So what I'm telling you is, don't limit yourself on the places and people and things that can help you get out of or navigate challenging situations in your life, right? Don't toss the baby out with the bathwater, right? We all bring something to the table, and my table that I'm bringing, what I'm bringing to the table today may not be what you need today. It may be what you need 2 years from now, or vice versa. Maybe it wouldn't have been what you needed 2 years ago, but it works for you now. So just keep that in mind as you continue to listen to the podcast. If you choose to continue to listen to the podcast, and by no means am expecting everybody to always follow me and do what I say and listen to this religiously. I mean, if that works for you, great. But you are your own person. You must find your own path in life. My path, 100% my path, is not going to be yours. There may be several miles on my path that are yours, and we can walk together. But my path is not yours, and yours is not mine. So I just wanted to put that out there. And, you know, there's no part of my life that's static. I'm forever in a flow. I'm forever growing and changing and evolving. And what worked for me 5 years ago no longer works for me today, because I'm continuing to grow and evolve. My life is not static. I cannot live a life that isn't evolving. And so I'm saying that to say this. There may be times on this podcast that I may come back. So let's just take, for instance, Sven Erlandson, the person who wrote this book that I recommended at the beginning of this episode, right? 3 years from now, I may look back and go, maybe he wasn't all that. But here today, he is. He's serving a purpose for what I need today. And 3 years from now, he may not, and I may move on to someone else and find other places, and people to gain inspiration and guidance from. So, again, I just give that some food for thought as you progress through your estrangement experience. If you are working with a therapist, the same thing goes for them. Sometimes we can work with a therapist for a year or two and everything be fine. And then you get into that third year and you're like, this is not working for me right now. Don't be afraid to move on and find another therapist who will be working for you. People can only take you as far as they've gone themselves, right? There are people that have gone much further on this path than I have. And I'm not there yet. So, back to today's episode. So they're not talking to you. You've been changing. You're in therapy. You've been watching, videos and reading things from the professionals, and you're seeing some error of your ways as a parent. And you want to apologize. You want to get, back with your children. You want to reconcile. You want to have a different relationship with them, but they won't talk to you, right? Because they say, you haven't changed. You're still the same. And they, all of that good stuff, right? They label you, they call you names, kind of thing. I want you to remember, estrangement and reconciliation is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And just because you have changed doesn't mean that they have changed yet. They may not be in a place in their life where they are willing to change, where they're willing to explore other things. And again, we come back to, you cannot change them. You have to accept they are where they are. I mean, you don't have to. I would encourage you to. I mean, you can continue to try to force yourself on them, and you can, continue to reach out to them when they've asked you not to and things along that line. But I would highly recommend against doing that, because it generally does not work, right? It only inflames things and makes things worse. But remember that this is it's a marathon. This is a long process for most people, okay? It's not a sprint. The second thing is, we have to respect their space. We have to respect their request, right? So I want you to stop for a minute and think about the times in your life. I'm talking to estranged parents here. Or, alternately, if you are an estranged adult child and you have an estranged parent who is, has estranged themselves from you, because that does happen too at times, right? So, but if they've asked for space, if they've asked you to stop contacting them, respect them for that. Because I want you to stop and think about how you feel when someone in your life, not your child, but someone else in your life, and when you've asked them not to contact you, you've said, hey, I just need some space. I've had a really rough week and I just really need time by myself. And they call you and they send you a text message and they email you and you're like, oh my God, I've asked them to stop. What that does is that's just prolonging things. That's prolonging the healing because it's like a restart. Every time we reach out to our estranged adult child when they've asked us not to, and just quite frankly, it just pisses them off, right? Because we have not given them what they have asked for. And it is not unreasonable for them to ask for space. It's not unreasonable for you as an estranged parent to ask for space. It's not unreasonable for anyone to ask for space in their life. And when someone violates that and does not honor that request that we have given, that we have asked for, then how does that make us feel? I don't know about you, but I get all kinds of twisted and angry when someone doesn't respect what I've asked for. And then the time clock starts all over again for me. If I've asked you for a week of leave me alone on Monday, and on Wednesday you've emailed me, and Thursday you've texted me, well, now we've started that week all over again in my eyes, right? And that's what estranged adult children do. So when they've asked for space, they've asked for no contact, and we reach out to them, you're just might as well just set yourself up to say, I'm restarting the clock again. And I know as an formerly estranged parent, I know your pain. I know it feels almost, there's a desperation to be reconnected to our children, right? There's a desperation to it because being estranged, being ostracized, being put out and away from community and connection is trauma. And so the first thing we do, right, is to say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'll do whatever it takes, just please talk to me again, right? And it doesn't work, okay? We as parents, I have to remember this too. We as parents, we are conditioned by society and by the natural way of being in the world as a parent with children, and I'm talking about young children, right? Is we control things. We control their life. We tell them when to go to bed. We tell them when to get up. We tell them what they're going to have for breakfast. We tell them what they're going to do on the weekend when they're really, really little. And then as they get to be, grow up and become teenagers and they start to want more independence, and then we're fighting with them against, again, control. It doesn't appear to be that way, but that really is in essence what it is. We as parents are wanting to control them, and that control tends to come from fear. And that control doesn't always have to be in your face, strong, I'm going to control you ways. Control can be something along the lines of, hey, do you really think that's a good decision? You've never really been good at skiing. Do you think it's a wise thing for you to go off skiing this weekend with friends? That is a passive-aggressive way of controlling. So we do it, and we do it without intention. But that's what that's how parents have been for eons, right? And so now we have adult children. They're adults. They don't want us to control them anymore, right? They don't. but we've been conditioned to. So we have to unlearn that. And that is really scary when we have our own baggage that we're dealing with that may come from, I don't know, fears of abandonment that we've been dealing with for decades upon decades, because most of us are in our 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s now, right, as parents. And so we have our own inner stuff that we've potentially not dealt with, because if we dealt with it, it doesn't tend to have that electric charge to get us all upset and emotional about things. So we're dealing with these experiences that we've had generally early on in life, and they just help us to manipulate our situations and try to manipulate people to keep ourselves from being fearful and to keep ourselves safe. Okay? So, I want us to also remember, we don't know what the estranged adult child is or is not doing, is or is not saying, right? We think we do. And I know that I went through this with my girls when I was estranged. Oh, yeah, they're over there saying this, that, and the other thing about me. Yep, I'm sure they're just living life happily right now. And yep, oh yeah, forget about mom. They never think about me. I said all those things. And I'm here to tell you, after having talked with estranged adult children, 9 times out of 10, what we think they're saying or doing or not saying or doing is not true. It's just not true. And how can we know if we're not in communication with them? And I'm here to tell you that reading something on social media, so if you're checking out, scoping out, sleuthing through their social media accounts and seeing things that appear to be this quote unquote happy little family picture that's on Facebook or on Instagram, that is oftentimes not reality. While yes, they may have a happy family, but it doesn't say, oh, look at that happy family and they're being happy without me. That's not what that says. We are interpreting that. I did that. I was blocked from social media, so I couldn't do that, but I was creating all sorts of scenarios in my head of things I thought they were saying and doing and going on with life happily without me. And I later learned that wasn't the case. So I just want you to be mindful of the mind games that you're playing with yourself, right? The things that you're telling yourself. And I want you to ask, do I know that to be fact? Do I have hardcore evidence that says this is true? Because I'm willing to bet you probably don't. And it's okay. It's that you're coming from that place of hurt and pain, right? And when we're in the middle of it, it's so hard to see the forest for the trees, right? It's so hard to say, oh my God, this is not get a grip. This is not reality, right? I don't know what they're doing because I don't have communication with them. So be mindful of what you're saying, right? And I think it's important to try to turn your perspective a little bit, right? Just turn it a quarter turn. You don't have to do a 180-degree turn right yet. Just do a little quarter turn, right? And ask yourself, what if they are growing and maturing? What if? And I'm here to tell you, again, that may not look to you like they're growing and evolving and maturing. But remember, oftentimes destruction has to happen before creation can happen. So it may, and again, we're not in somebody's head. We don't know what they're thinking. So things are oftentimes happening behind the scenes that we are not aware of, right? They may be having arguments with their spouse about not being in contact with you. They may be talking with a friend that says, I really miss my mom. We don't know what conversations and things are happening in their life when they're not talking to us. Okay? So the first things that we need to do in order to try to work towards reconciliation, right? It's similar to, and again, for those who may not be aware, I am a practice manager for a psychotherapy group practice. And so I deal and work with a lot of therapists who do couples counseling. And it's interesting because anytime I talk with them, oftentimes what they will suggest is when somebody comes in for couples counseling, they'll suggest each partner get their own individual counseling, right? Because oftentimes there's so much stuff going on for the individual person that is affecting the couple. And until those individual things are resolved, it's next to impossible to resolve them as a couple. Okay? And that's very similar here with estrangement. So this is why I say we must accept things are where they are. Right? Right here, right now, today, we have to accept they're not talking to me. I am in estrangement. And I cannot change them. The only person I can change is myself, right? And we must allow things to be as they are. That which, what is it, the saying, what we resist persists. So in that resistance of accepting things to be where they are, we're just prolonging and persisting it, right? It's just, oh my gosh. Try to stop forcing something to be different when it can't be right now. Okay? And stop trying to force them to do something they're not ready to do. They may not be ready right now. They may not be ready next year. They may not be ready 5 years from now. And that is another reality that we have to accept. Okay? Again, I've said it before, not every estrangement is going to end in reconciliation. I recognize this. However, I do believe that reconciliation can happen even if one person is willing to change a little bit. Okay? So what do you do? What do you do? If they're not talking to you, what do you do? Well, the first thing, we've talked about it. Respect their decision. If they don't want you in their life right now, respect that. And try to find it within yourself to say, I know Dr. Coleman, Joshua Coleman, who is a psychotherapist, talks about this a lot, is, try to find it in your heart to accept and understand that your adult child is not estranging from you as a form of punishment. They are doing it as an act of some sort of self-preservation. And I know that may not seem logical to us as parents, but I want you to stop for a second and remember when you, and if your parents have passed, when they were alive, with your parents, your own parents, was there ever a time when you felt like you just needed some space? You may not have estranged from them and totally cut them off, but when you needed space for self-preservation, you were like, oh my God, if she calls me one more time, I'm going to pull my hair out. Or if he does not lay off of me about what I'm doing for a living, oh my God, he's making me nuts. find it hard to believe that we have, as parents who are also adult children, I find it next to impossible to think that we haven't all thought that at some time or another in our relationship with our parents. So respect their decision. They're doing it for a reason, even if the reason doesn't seem logical or is not known to us, right? Give them the space they've asked for. If they've asked you not to contact, don't contact them. Okay? And turn your attention to yourself. You have to take the attention away from them, at least for a while. And while you're turning your attention to yourself, my suggestions, again, I said it in the last episode, journal. Process your grief. You are grieving a relationship. And it's important to understand, to learn about and understand the grieving process. And that process is not linear. You are not going to process grief as step 1 and then go on to step 2 and then go on to step 3. It doesn't work that way. Grief has a mind of its own. And you will vacillate between stages of grief. Okay? But it's important to process that grief. Because if you're not processing that grief, you're storing it, and that is going to become a trigger for you down the road if and when you can reconcile with your adult child. Okay? Give yourself this, I encourage everyone, whether they're in estrangement or not, but especially if they're in estrangement, give yourself a weekend away from everyone and everything. Okay, as a matter of fact, I'm working on a retreat plan of sorts for estranged parents and estranged adult children, where to do just this. Okay, getting away from everyone and everything. It's really hard to have a change in perspective when your scenery and life haven't changed. Okay, it's really, really, really hard. I don't know about you. I've have spent some time as of late in my home and haven't necessarily, I go off, I leave my home to go to work and all, but on my days off, I'm generally inside reading, researching, working on the podcast, all these types of things. And I find at times I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I having such a hard time thinking about something or trying to remember whatever? And I leave the house and I get in the car and I go for a drive, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, oh yeah, oh, there's this and there's that. It's getting outside of your bubble, right, to begin to have a different perspective. And I think it is super, super, super important for estranged parents to do this. Get away from all of your friends, get away from everybody who has just this nonstop chatter in your mind and in your ear, and so you can have some space and time to think about things and do things a little differently and entertain different thoughts. Okay. I also, again, encourage in therapy for estranged parents, if for nothing else, then to have a safe place for you to vent and get some stuff out. Right? Therapy has changed my life. It has saved my life. And I encourage everyone to get into therapy. Estranged parents and estranged adult children. And if you don't want to get into therapy, I encourage coaching, some sort of somebody who understands estrangement. There are several people out there that do that, as well as myself. And so, again, coaching and therapy are two very different things. So check that out if that is of interest to you, to see which would serve you better and best. And I've said it before, I'm not a religious person. I do consider myself to be spiritual. But if you believe in prayer at all, then I encourage you to pray, right? I don't, there is no way of changing and reconciling with someone who does not want to change and does not want to reconcile. And that just is a fact. And that sucks. It sucks as a mom who wants so desperately to have her children in her life. And to be on the outside looking in is one of the most painful things a human being can ever experience. But adding to that pain is the insistence that things be different than what they are. Right? I remember when my partner and I split after 10 years of being together. And I did everything under the sun trying to, reconcile and get back together and apologize and this, that, and the other thing. And it just wasn't happening. My partner was not having it. And my partner went on very early on to live a happy life. And it took me many, many years to reach that place, because I was fighting against reality. Okay? I don't want to see you do that. I don't want you to waste years upon years upon years of your life. Okay? There are times when other people, and I've talked about this before too, other people, when you begin to change your life and your way of being in the world, other people notice that. And there are times when you could potentially, I don't know, let's just say you're at a restaurant one night and you come across the mother of your son's, one of your son's best friends in school, and that he's remained friends with, and, she talks to you for a bit of time, and then she goes back to her son and says, wow, I saw Mary the other day and the other night eating out, and man, something has really changed with her. She's just a completely different person, and in a really good way. Like, she didn't seem so depressed. There was a light in her eyes, and, she just seemed to really be at a good place enjoying her life. And then he goes off to her son and says, hey man, the other day my mom ran into your mom, and she talked about how your mom has just really changed. And your son says, yeah, right. How's she gonna, she hasn't changed. And he goes, no, man, really. Like, my mom talked about how she seemed so happy and light, and like she wasn't, so sad and depressed, and she wasn't talking about her kids in a bad way anymore. Like, she talked about how much she missed you guys, but like she wasn't like, sobbing about it all the time and things like that. Like, I don't know, mom said she changed. Well, that may not spur an immediate him reaching out, picking up the phone and calling you, but I'm here to tell you it's planting a seed. We never know the ripple out effects that we have in life. And that goes for both good and bad things, right? But when we change our inner self, it can't not change the lives of the people we interact with. Because there's a ripple out effect. And so while it may not seem possible right now, in the way that you have envisioned it, for them to come around and reconcile with you, it may not seem like that can happen right now. But I'm here to invite you to open up your mind to the possibilities. That maybe, perhaps, whether you call it God, the universe, spirit, source, whatever you call it, that there might be a way of this happening that you cannot fathom or imagine right now. Just open up some space for that to occur, right? If we have it in our head that it's going to occur this one particular way, we're not going to recognize the potential for it to occur in a different way. And we could miss out on opportunities. So I just encourage you to try to work on yourself. Even if you already have, continue that. I am continuing it. My estrangement first began in 2016. It is now 2022, and I am still in therapy. I am still growing. I am still evolving. I am still changing. Because I don't want my life to be static. So continue to work on yourself. Continue to give yourself, to continue to create a life that is joyful for you, and invite the universe or God or whatever to surprise you with a brilliant way that the universe and God has a way of doing in having reconciliation happen with your adult children. Okay? So that brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent, and that you're able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you have received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, and perhaps even leaving us a positive review on any of the major platforms. You can also follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to either work with me or have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Until next time.